And we are live, episode 150, I believe, of the Energy Week podcast. Leonardo DiCaprio joined by Kate Winslet, according to Big Oren, and so that's who we are. So
Which one of us is which? That's the
I hope
question.
I'm Leonardo. I hope I'm
Okay.
Leonardo, and you're
I'll
Kate
be Kate Winslet then.
Winslet. Yeah, yeah. And so it just depends on which Leonardo I am, because there's like, is it the anti-climate change Leo, or is it like Inception Leo? So just depends on where we're at. So
You could dispense with the DiCaprio and go with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle.
that would be awesome. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Of course, Raphael is my favorite. Ninja Turtle. So, but close enough. It is the Energy Week podcast, Energy Week show. If you missed any of this, you can download it on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast at. Miss Wald, how was your weekend?
It was lovely. I don't know. What more can I say? It was a weekend.
Yeah, we got a good one here in Texas. It's finally warming up a little bit. It's the wind here. So, but last week, OPEC met and they did things.
OPEC met. They did things and the oil market shook. I feel like that's the opening of like the OPEC Bible.
Well, listen, prices right now at the time of this recording are down. WTI is down $2.99, almost $3, and so which
It's
is
like
funny
they
because
had
prices went up last week. So
it's like they had some sort of like latent shell shock maybe
mhm.
because the meeting happened and they're like, oh well, I think we're gonna we're gonna ease the cuts, we're gonna increase production a little bit, and prices are like, oh yeah, we like that. Is that because they saw that it was a good sign for demand? They're like, oh, even OPEC, even Saudi Arabia thinks that things are looking up. So then the prices go up, and now they're kind of coming back down to the reality of the fact that, like, I don't know, all of Europe is still in lockdown. And what was it they were saying about India? They're trying to lock down the city of Mumbai. Do
Yeah,
they realize like how big that city is?
I would hope so.
And so now oil prices are coming down a bit from there. Oh, and the Iran thing. I think that a lot of the Iran thing, and I think I chose like 4 articles to kind of encompass the entire price situation here. But the Iran thing, it's like I think they don't realize how much. I think most people don't realize how much Iranian oil is actually on the market these days. That many more barrels of oil are actually on the market than they seem to think.
Mhm.
And so I think that that has this effect of maybe making them think that if something actually happens at these Vienna talks, that it's actually going to result in more barrels on the market, which I'm not sure that it will.
And my understanding is there's 2 million barrels going on, right?
Sorry, 2 main what?
2 million barrels will be coming on over the next 3 months.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's hard to say. I think it depends on how many barrels you think are currently on the market. But Iran's capacity before the new round of sanctions was like around 4 million,
Mhm.
and you'd have to check I'd have to go to my favorite trusted source, Tanker Trackers, to really, if I wanted to look and see how many barrels were really really getting out there. But there's a lot of hiding things through Malaysia and Oman and UAE and that kind of thing. So I think that there's probably more on the market. I think one of the interesting things, though, is that if these barrels become legal barrels as opposed to the clandestine barrels, then Iran could charge more for them because they have to discount it more because it's all kind of under the rug. So I mean, maybe once they start charging more, wouldn't that raise the price of it? So I'm not sure that everyone's got quite the right calculus here.
So my take was about demand, the Saudis and demand. And so if the Saudis are saying, and the OPEC saying, hey, we think demand's coming back, well, then it would make sense for price to go up. I mean, right, because you said, okay, well, we're going to put more barrels on, we think the price is going to go up. The problem is, wait, am I saying this backwards? I might say it backwards if I'm not careful here. Okay, yeah. So the past 2 times the Saudis have cut, and that has, to me, been a signal that they thought demand was soft, and so the price has gone up. Now they're saying they're going to increase, and the prices goes up. It's like, well, if whatever OPEC does, the price goes up. It's like there's no signal that they can send out that makes the price go down. And I know the price is trending downward this morning, but there is other news that seems to influence what's going on there.
What? There's other news besides OPEC?
Well, and we had someone comment last week about more lockdowns are coming, and we're seeing them. I mean, surely at some point we'll come on this podcast and be like, okay, the lockdowns are done. Like, surely, like that day's coming, right, Dr. Wald?
The lockdowns are never done. The lockdowns will never be done. I submit this as my my prediction. They will always find a need to have a lockdown for some reason, whether it's COVID related or not. One person they could find didn't get a vaccine. Therefore, we must, maintain some sort of stricter. I have a very cynical view of these things, as listeners have probably gathered.
I mean, at this point, it's hard to argue with that, because you're sitting there going, when will the lockdowns end? And it feels like in the U.S. that we're going to move past it. And of course, we are the biggest consumer, so that does give you some hope. But internationally, if you look at it, and it's not just about oil demand, it's about everything that goes along with it, right? Because if you're shutting down Mumbai or whatever, and however effective they are with that, we'll see. But you shut that down, well, it has trade implications and travel implications and all this stuff. We talk about the supply chain, and it's so funny. We don't talk about the supply chain constraints when we talk about lockdowns. Yeah. We won't talk about it when it hits the Suez Canal.
Exactly. Or if you're looking to get like microchips.
Yes, microchips. So it's I don't know. So the Saudis are going to put the Saudis, OPEC, and the Saudis, I believe, has put 2 million barrels on by the end of July or in July. Yeah. But that should keep prices somewhat stable. And I talked to Mark Rossano on Friday, and he was looking at their frac spread count, and he said that it's going back up. And so he feels like the U.S. production numbers will start to rise as well. And so if you see that, and you see 2 million barrels come on, then it's hard to see the price really moving, that 65, 70 range for, $100 oil or whatever you want to say. Like it seems like that's going to be reined in.
Yeah, that was one of my big questions: is how are the shale companies going to respond to this? Because if you look at, oil production, you look at the weekly oil production numbers, it's really basically been within this like 10.9 to 11.1, I think, maybe, or just 11 range, which is basically the same. I mean, they're like, oh, it went up to 11 from 10.9, but that's really basically the same thing. And if you look at the rig counts and you compare them, say, to where they were, last year, there's so many fewer rigs. They seem to be basically steadily climbing, but not by that much. Now, I know like rig counts aren't really the greatest measure of oil production increasing, but are the increases we're seeing in rig counts even enough to increase production, or are they just enough to keep production steady? And I think people have different ideas about this, and it's, I'm not entirely sure, but I'm guessing with the kind of rig count increases that we're seeing, it's maybe enough to keep production steady.
Yeah, so the numbers are kind of wonky. So according to Baker Hughes, we're up 13 from their prior count. This is on April 1st, but we're down 234 from last year. And so you start going, oh, okay, well, yeah. So we're not going to be anywhere near that, and that's the U.S. rig count. So we're not going to be anywhere near back to where we were. But to your point, at what point do you level off production? Of course, when you think about the ducks and all the other stuff involved, it might not take as many rigs. Internationally, we're down 344 rigs from a year ago. Canada is the only place up year over year.
Well, but that makes a lot of sense. Wasn't it like, not last year, this time, but before, they were Alberta put its own, production prorationing on their oil. So they were tamping it down artificially. So I'm not surprised that they're increasing there.
I know, but it's just kind of a weird thing, because all the negative oil and gas headlines out of Canada, they're the one place, they're the one country that you can spot to on this map that's up year over year. Okay, so the Saudis, I'm curious, what was your read on it? Was it another Saudi surprise, or did you think this is where it was going? What was kind of your read on the meeting?
I mean, I didn't think that they were going I thought more that they were going to roll over than whether they were going to increase, but I was hoping that Saudi Arabia would give some sort of indication as to what it was planning to do with its extra million barrels a day that it's been keeping off the market, because I think that a lot of the volatility that we saw going in, basically over the previous month, there's a lot of price volatility. And I think that the fact that we there was no guidance about this million barrels a day, that was whether they could just dump it all back on the market, one day if they wanted to. And so I think the lack of guidance from that was kind of fueling some of this volatility. And so I was hoping, I think I said in my pre-OPEC piece that like traders are looking to see some kind of guidance. They would really like to see this. And so even though the kind of slight increase in production wasn't expected, I think that the guidance that they're giving on this is helpful. The oil market likes to know what OPEC is going to do. They've always looked to OPEC as this like, hey, they're going to tell us what they're going to be producing for 6 months out. And now we haven't really had that for the past couple months. And now at least there's like we're like, okay, we know what they're to expect for the next 3 months. And so I think that's helpful. That's more of a, like what OPEC used to be than what it has been.
So you mentioned Iran. Let's circle back around to that. According to Platts, Iranian production's at 2.14 million barrels a day in February, and they're exporting around, let's call it 900,000 barrels a day to China.
I think it's probably more than that. I think that's all that can really be confirmed. But my guess is the actual barrels that are getting there are probably more than that.
Do you think it's larger than? So this is just shy of 50%. So you think it's over the 50% mark?
Sorry, say that again.
So according to this data, this would be like 40% of their exports are going to China. You think it's over 50%, probably?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is.
So where does this leave OPEC in relationship to Iran and China? Like, will that be a narrative that's going to come into play more? Because obviously China's not concerned about the U.S. sanctions. Iran's not concerned about the U.S. sanctions. Would China lean on Iran to get cheaper, as you mentioned, cheaper oil for cheaper prices if prices continue to rise? Could that put a unique strain on OPEC, or is OPEC be like, whatever, what do we care?
Well, I think that what would be interesting is that if the sanctions are lifted, then Iran is going to push OPEC for some kind of exemption. They're going to be like, hey, we've been under sanctions for all this time. You need to give us an exemption while we get back up. And I think that could reintroduce some of the fissures that we saw between Iran and Saudi Arabia before, there were all these sanctions. So I remember there was this one meeting where that like they just couldn't get along, and Russia had to like go and meet with the Saudis separately in one room, and then the Iranians separately in another room, and they were posting all these pictures from it, and then finally they kind of managed to work it out. So I think that Iran kind of being like a non-entity, they know they're producing and they know they're exporting, but officially they're not. And so I think that has reduced the friction between Saudi Arabia and Iran, but that could reemerge. So like the biggest friction that we've seen recently in OPEC is actually between Saudi Arabia and UAE, which is what we saw in like January and February. And but if Iran reemerges as a source of friction, then that will, I think, sublimate these smaller issues.
Okay, let's move on to something that Ellen and I are really very excited to announce here. I mean, I don't know if we can contain our enthusiasm. Janet Yellen to call for global minimum tax rate. And I looked to see, Ellen, if this was posted on April 1st. It wasn't.
Oh, that would have been a really good April Fool's joke.
It's so believable that you would have checked it, but no, it's not April Fool's, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would have pegged that definitely as an April Fool's joke.
Right.
But
this is one of those Babylon Bees that you're like, is it really Babylon Bee or not? I'm not. It's so close. It's so close. It's hard to tell. So I have a lot of thoughts on this. First off, we all agree that certain countries that have these competitive advantages will not enforce this, or if they do enforce it, they will give the companies a break somewhere else, right? So if you're China, you might slap on this global tax to benefit everyone, and then you give them tax credit somewhere else to offset it, right? So we fully acknowledge that this will not work.
Yeah.
Right.
The idea of it is like, is this supposed to be like a company supposed to take this seriously? Like, okay, say you're the CEO of, I don't know, IBM.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Or say you're one of the CEO of, I don't know, one of those companies that barely pays anything in
Mm-hmm.
corporate tax. Okay, so say you're and say so you're like, okay, so they don't really pay much anyway, but or say you're a CEO of a company that actually does pay corporate taxes. Okay, and so during the Trump administration, they lowered it from 35% to 21%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And obviously, you thought that was great, and maybe you use some of it for share buybacks, but maybe you use some of it for all sorts of other things in the company, or whatever. Now, this new administration wants to raise the rate to 28%, which is still lower than the 35 it was before. But I mean, and then in addition to that, they're saying, well, we'd like to establish a global corporate tax. I mean, like, they can't even have global like nuclear standards for like nuclear weapons, and they think they're going to have a global corporate tax rate, minimum rate. Like, who are they? Like, I don't get it. Like, I mean, is this? Do they? I mean, is Janet Yellen? Sorry, I'm like at a loss for words. I mean, Janet Yellen is a serious person. By the way, I almost met her once. By the way, I like almost introduced myself, but she was clearly leaving to try to catch a plane or something. But anyway, she seems like a very serious woman, right? She's been like the head of the Fed. She's the Treasury Secretary. She's a serious woman, right? Is she like, I'm going to peddle this because it might make the 28% tax rate easier for companies to swallow? Is this just like a PR stunt? I'm going to go peddle this as a PR stunt? Or like, is this a serious thing? Does she actually think that like they're going to get the global community? What is the global community? How does someone enforce this? Is there going to be a global IRS? Like, I'm sorry, you don't enforce anything except with the guns. That's how you enforce things in the global community. Guns and ships.
Well, and one more thing, the dollar.
Yeah.
So
what are they going to do? Try to devalue the dollar against
no,
places that don't do this?
So I will fully admit this, that I currently believe that the U.S. is trying to protect the status of the dollar as a reserve currency. So I definitely see things through those lenses. That's my bias. I'm open. I'm admitting it. So when I see a story like this, they are trying to protect the dollar as the reserve currency. So the more companies, so if you get countries around the world to agree to tax at a rate, and oh, by the way, the U.S. is the one leading that charge. How haven't you strengthened your position as the reserve currency?
But who are we strengthening it against?
What's that?
Like, who's our threat? What's threatening the dollar as the reserve currency?
Well, I think, okay, if you go back to the Iran stuff, I think the digital yuan potentially with China, they're going to want to subvert as many U.S. sanctions as possible. And so if you can figure out a way to do that with the digital yuan or some other kind of currency from China, they're going to do it. I don't think China's going to play the sanction game with the U.S. forever. So they're going to want to get around it, right?
Yeah.
And so
but they already do. I mean, they already like are the biggest like foreign trading partner with Iran. They already do it. Iran can't stand them, but they have no other choice. So I don't think that like other countries are like, they know that China's not reliable, and that China's currency isn't reliable either, is it?
No, it's okay. I think if you look at like Huawei in Brazil, Brazil was not interested in Huawei, and then China gives them vaccines for COVID-19, and all of a sudden Brazil's like, Huawei ain't that bad. We'll consider it. Okay, well, that's not a step to going towards the that's not the same as going towards the removing off the reserve currency, but it is a step in the direction of from where you were to where you are. You look at Africa right now; they are putting vaccines all across Africa to try to get the diplomacy out there. China is doing a lot of things to assert its authority globally. Now, I don't think they're going to have the military presence like we do, but they are doing things. I just don't think they're going to play the game tit for tat with the dollar with the U.S. So, the 25-year deal they struck with Iran, I think, is kind of just saying, hey, we don't really care. You can sanction them or not. And the Iranians aren't begging to get out of the nuclear deal or to get back in the nuclear deal, right?
Well, I mean, there's something going on in Vienna today, apparently.
Well, okay, I missed it. What's going on? Do you know?
Oh, there's some sort of like JCPOA meeting in Vienna today where some people think that the US, that they might discuss relaxing sanctions, but it's entirely unclear. I don't know. I think personally, it's not, the negotiations are not very high level,
Yeah.
but I think it's interesting. It's like vaccine diplomacy, like it's like a totally new meaning for like vaccine passport, like we
Yeah.
like vaccine diplomacy, which makes a lot of sense. But yeah, so all these people would be happy to get the Sinovacs, and so they will then be like, okay, we'll take we'll give your company this contract to do this like big
it changes the door. And they'll loan money or whatever. I just don't think that the dollar. I don't think the dollar is going to collapse tomorrow. I'm not saying that. I think that there's just pressures on the dollar. I think if you look at the crypto stuff, I think Janet Yellen does see that as a threat to the dollar.
Oh yeah, forget you own crypto in the United States. I think the days are numbered.
And so I think they see that as a threat. And so I think the digital yuan is a threat as well. And the more that you can control corporations. So think about this: if you say, hey, we're going to institute a corporate global tax rate, right? And they're saying, well, that's to keep the big companies from moving around. That's hogwash. What that does is it creates a barrier of entry to go into the global space that you're like, okay, well, if I'm going here now, I got to pay this tax rate plus whatever tax rates they have. It makes things harder, which actually means that you're cutting out bottom level competition. And so those companies all would have more of an aligned interest than, being able to go from zero to something. So I don't know. Maybe I'm over too much on the reserve currency. I don't think it's going to collapse tomorrow. I'm not saying that. If you look at her comments, look how she's handling things, the dollar's being printed in mass like it hasn't been before. You would think that you'd have to worry about the protection of the dollar. Because the only thing that protects the dollar, to be clear, is the other countries agreeing that the dollar is valuable.
Yeah.
It's not
any gold backing it.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, so it's not about how much we print or don't print. We could print 100 gazillion tomorrow, and as long as everyone agreed that it was still valuable, we would still have it. And so
here's the thing. So what about so weren't there just recently comments that were made about like the Biden's infrastructure plan, and they're saying like, oh no, we're not worried about inflation. I mean, but obviously like in saying that, kind of they're just trying to project this atmosphere of everything's fine. Don't look behind the curtain. Don't worry. Meaning they are worried that people will think there's going to be inflation, which will then beget inflation.
Well, there is inflation already, right?
Yeah. I mean, we all know there's inflation. It's just they refuse to measure it.
So David, yeah, they changed the CPI. I can't remember when. They've changed a couple times. Anyways, David Bonson's take on this is that the U.S., while it's kind of blowing its currency up, there are other countries are blowing their currency up so much more that the U.S. has a gap between here and there, and that's possible that we have enough protection to where it doesn't matter. But yeah, I don't know. When you read her comments, you think about what's happening internationally, like with the India stuff. I don't know what's going on with the India stuff, but Janet Yellen had a call with the Indian Minister of Finance, like right when their Bitcoin ban was being talked about. God, this feels like there's a lot of pressure from the U.S. to make sure that folks are sticking to the good old-fashioned dollar. Now, I know Anas. We talked about this Texas Guest podcast. I know he's pretty big on the dollar, and I think it's here for a while. But I don't know. If you're China, would you want to be screwing around with the dollar? Or would you want to use your own currency?
If I was China, I'd be screwing around with everything.
No. Would you want to be tied to having to use the dollar, or would you want to completely decouple from the dollar as much as you could?
I'd want to be able to use it when it benefited me, but I'd want to be able to decouple as like Saudi Arabia cannot decouple from the dollar, but why should China put itself in that position?
Right. Exactly. Okay.
I remember when they were paying for Russian oil and yuan, and Russia was like, well, you can buy our oil in yuan. We'll take your yuan.
Well, I mean, if you think this one more thought is, Venezuela was sending gold to Iran to pay for oil, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's cost intensive. That's laborsome. The plane goes down full of gold. You've lost it. Why would China not be like, hey, let's facilitate this deal, guys? Use the digital yuan or or whatever currency you want to use of ours. Use our currency, and then you don't have to put the ship on the plane on the gold on the plane and worry about all this stuff. Like it's so much easier, so much quicker. And oh, by the way, we'll help you spy on your citizens while you're at it. Like that's a win for everyone.
Exactly.
So okay,
Exactly.
let's see here. Fracking Titan is bulking up with $6.4 billion acquisition as oil prices recover. Talking about Pioneer. I'm not sure with Walt. I know David Blackman and David Ramsey Wood both like this acquisition. I don't.
Didn't they just buy Parsley Energy?
Yeah, they did not too long ago.
Which is cute because wasn't Scott Sheffield's son the one that started Parsley?
I believe so. Yeah, I think you're right on that.
Like the son breaks off from the father only to be eaten by. Sorry, it's like so. I feel like there's some sort of larger like meaning about this.
Well, my question is, Sheffield was one pounding for the pro rationing last year, right? We're in the Biden era.
Yeah, wasn't he? Because he wanted, because he was fine with it because he knew it wasn't going to do anything to him, right?
And wasn't he also the one who said that he hopes that companies who aren't mitigating their flare investors leave? Wasn't that him as well?
Yeah.
And so
he's
now
a big guy now. He's in the big boy category, just like Exxon.
That's exactly right. While they might not have the size and power of Exxon and Chevron, I'm wondering how much of these acquisitions, obviously they had to return value to their shareholders, but are also so that they can throw their weight around and to kind of use these things to dictate policy and to influence lawmakers to keep competition out.
Yeah. Oh, totally. They're like pushing at the glass ceiling of big oil. Sorry, that was probably a bad metaphor too, but they're knocking at the door.
They're trying to break the glass ceiling. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
A breakthrough moment.
Please don't accuse me of sexism for using that term. Audience.
Isn't that a term for women though?
Yeah, when like breaking the glass ceiling is like when women, become like CEOs and stuff.
I don't know how it could be sexist for you to say something about that, but okay.
I don't know.
Dr. Wald.
These days, you never know.
On behalf of the Intrigue podcast, we denounce sexism in all forms, fashions, thoughts, ideas, written down in your mind, in your dreams, wherever you may find it. We denounce it strongly, firmly, and 100%. Thank you.
Exactly. Now back to Pioneer.
Pioneer
wants to be big oil, so it's buying up little oil.
Yeah, I don't know. I know. Again, I've seen some folks that have said that this is a good place strategically inside the industry, and that's fine. We'll see. I'm a little reluctant to make much thought on that because how would the Anadarko Oxy deal played out without COVID? Right? What would that look like? Would we be praising Vicky Hull like, oh my God, she was a visionary? Right now it's like an albatross around the neck. And so same thing.
Yeah, but prices would have still stayed. Well, it's hard to say. I mean, what if she waited and bought it in last June?
Oh well, right. Obviously, yeah, she could have got it for a lot better of a deal. I'm saying I'm not convinced that because we're not convinced we're out of the woods yet. It's a little early to know how I feel about these types of deals. It's not. I don't know. Is this going to be I do think we're going to see consolidation in the Permian because it's going to make sense, especially if the Democrats put a lot of legislative things in place that makes it harder to drill, more permitting requirements, stuff like that. Yeah. But you're going to need a bigger company to do that. So I don't know if this is the beginning of consolidation or not. But with Pioneer specifically, it seems to be more. At least part of the angle is they want to be the big boys and throw their weight around. Oh, by the way, they did not actually cut production last year, even though they're begging for the Railroad Commission to do it. So just keep that in mind. Never forget.
Of course.
They would have, obviously, but they didn't want to.
Of course.
Okay. Let's see here. We've got two more stories, I believe. Biden will push through infrastructure plan if no Republican support. Energy Secretary says. By the way, did you see the deal with Pete Buttigieg ride the bike from the SUV?
I would like to say that was that was my most popular tweet in a really long time. I know when other people have a tweet go viral, it's thousands and thousands, but I got 100 and something likes on that, which is huge for me. So yeah, that I think I said something. What is it that I said? about it. I said there's a larger metaphor here about renewables slash green slash clean energy and how dependent they actually are on fossil fuels. I mean, some people have these arguments. They're like, well, the Secret Service and this and that and whatever, and at least he's trying or showing. I mean, come on. Like, that would be like, who's it? Zinke? He like rode a horse into the Interior Department the first day. Imagine if he like that was like for show, like everyone could tell, like that was
Right.
photo op. Imagine if he'd continued to like. Imagine if he had someone bring the horse in a trailer to like 3 blocks away, and then he'd gotten on the horse and like that. Imagine if he kept doing that every single day.
I know.
Yeah. That's what this would be like.
Yes, it's anyway. Okay, so we got a let's see infrastructure plan. What's it? $2 trillion? Is that right? 1.9 something like that.
Yeah, and they're like, well, I mean, it's some of the stuff is insane. So I read some of the White House like talking points on it, and I think they were like written by a 12-year-old.
Have you heard the press secretary?
Yeah. I say that because like I actually used to teach writing to 12-year-olds. So
okay. Well,
yeah, like they actually sound like my 12-year-olds wrote better than that. They were like they want to electrify vehicles.
Yeah.
Vehicles are like already like run on, they are like electrified. Are they going to like remove the internal combustion engines and put the batteries in? Is that what they want to do? 'Cause, like that's not how the verb works. Whatever. Like, there were so many things that didn't make any sense in those talking points. But hey, it's $2 trillion spending plan. So,
just send me and Miss Wald $100 million apiece.
Remember the what was it? Do you remember the shovel-ready projects that weren't really shovel-ready?
Yeah, those shovels still aren't off the shelves.
Yeah. So how many of these roads and bridges and ports and airports and underground water systems and broadband are shovel ready or not?
Probably
And
not.
I'm not saying that we don't need to fix the infrastructure. We do. But is 2 trillion. But the other part where they're trying to like, oh, it's a jobs thing. It's a jobs thing. Like, oh, we're going to take the pipe fitters and have them, plug up the wells and install solar. Like, come on, stop being dumb. Like, these are like, you're going to have to train people. You're going to have to do, and it's, I just like it's still so annoying to be like lied to like this. Like do a bill to fix the highways and then do a bill to fix the ports and then do a bill to fix the airports or something like that.
I'm going to say this, and if you're mad, you listen to a libertarian speak, and you've done that for some time, so deal with it. But why are we paying taxes? Like, why are we paying taxes? They just print the money at will. Like, this makes no sense to me. Like, we're saying we're going to keep printing the money, and then we're going to raise the taxes, and then we're going to institute a global tax. It's like, guys, you're printing more by orders of magnitude than we will ever collect in taxes. This whole thing is just bananas, and it's not a Democrat thing, it's a Republican thing too. They do the same thing. I was critical of Trump for doing the same thing. Like, we just spend so much money, and then it was like, oh, we got to tax people. I do not understand it. It completely frustrates me. And so Janet Yellen's comments about global taxation and everyone needs to pay their fair share, well, okay. I just, so most of these projects won't work. We'll waste $2 trillion, and then we'll have to come up with another plan that won't work again, and then we'll spend another $3 trillion, and we're going to tax people to death because that makes sense. So
we haven't even spent the stimulus money that we passed before. So like you can pass the plan, but like, are we actually going to spend this money? We're just going to print it, and then what?
If I wouldn't be in favor of this, but if they would just print it and at least put it into your 401k, like if they just took like 1.9 trillion and put it to everyone's 401k, you couldn't touch it till you're 65, obviously. And it's going to the big corporations. At least then we're going to benefit from it, because a lot of this money will just be completely wasted.
Yeah, and it's so weird that he's like tapped a bunch all these people, like including the new energy secretary Granholm, who, by the way, she had her moment at the OPEC meeting. Like, she was the biggest player who wasn't there. because the first question right off the bat, so she tweeted like right before the OPEC meeting that she had a phone call with Abdulaziz bin Salman, with the Saudi energy minister, and that something like about affordable energy. Okay, and so obviously the first question out was like, oh, did Saudi Arabia decide to increase oil production because they got a call from the energy secretary? And Abdulaziz was like, that call was scheduled a long time ago, and we didn't discuss that. They're like, the oil market was not even mentioned. It was like, we discussed like carbon capture and climate, and we didn't discuss prices. We didn't discuss the oil market at all. But like, no one believed it. I read this CNN article about it later, and they basically were like, they did everything just short of coming out to say that like Granholm pressured him about oil prices and they responded, which did not happen at all. Like literally, like the exact opposite happened, and it was insane. I'm like, who, like, were they listening to a totally different press conference than I was? And that press conference was long and included all sorts of weird comments, like about people's beards and glasses.
Okay. Well, let's get to our last story of the day. Let's talk about Russia. Russia. Okay. Russia is, let's see here. I should have had this on the wrong computer. Satellite images show huge Russian military buildup in the Arctic. Russia is amassing unprecedented military might in the Arctic and testing its newest weapons in a region freshly ice-free due to climate emergency.
Wait a minute.
Russia is amassing unprecedented military might in the Arctic and testing its newest weapons in a region freshly ice-free due to the climate emergency. And a bid to secure its northern coast and open up a key shipping route from Asia.
So all of you who drive internal combustion cars are responsible for Russia's expanding military presence.
Commies.
Or could we just blame China, because they're emitting more than anyone else, built many new coal power plants. China responsible for Russia's military buildup in Arctic.
You can tell. What's so funny about this is that CNN, like, they are really pounding to be scared of Russia stuff because they have all of like the Russian. They have like a Russian propaganda video on this page. Like the AK-47.
Oh, the video, the anti-ship cruise missile.
No. Even further down, they have that. They have a Russian army demonstration video of its new ski sled for the Arctic. Because yes, we fight so many battles in the Arctic that watching the Russians fire an AK-47 back on a snowmobile makes. Oh gosh, CNN.
If I was Finland, I'd be worried.
Yeah, exactly.
They fought the Russians in the, on sleds before. So
Russia insists its motives are peaceful and economic.
Oh my god.
Oh,
maybe he's just preparing. What's that event at the Winter Olympics where you have to ski and then shoot?
Oh yeah, I don't know what it's called.
Maybe he's really preparing for that.
Mm-hmm. That's what it was.
I'm just saying, like, and now I'm like going to be accused of like making excuses for Russia. I'm now a Russian agent.
Listen, they're not paying well, so I'm going to be bought as a Russian propagandist. Putin's not paying me enough, so I'm willing to vouch for some other country because.
Listen to this, okay? At the time, this was in 2018. Putin pledged a new generation of weapons. And at the time, U.S. officials scorned the new weapons as technically far-fetched and improbable. Yet they appear to be nearing fruition, according to the Norwegian intelligence chief. He said this, whatever it is, new technology with hypersonic speeds makes it hard to defend against. So Norway is worried. So maybe we should be worried.
Did you see the map down here at the bottom with the bunkers on it?
The climate, wait, this gets even better. The climate emergency has removed many of Russia's natural defenses to its north, such as walls of sheet ice at an unprecedented rate. I'm sorry, but okay, I actually studied this stuff, and all that ice was not a defense. It was not seen as a natural defense. It was seen as a serious issue. Russia always needed a warm water port because all of its ports froze at some point during the year. That was one of the reasons why it was constantly expanding and trying to like take new places and things like that. I mean, I had this great picture that I show in my lecture of a Russian ship frozen in the water and it's like tilted on its side. This is like worse than the container ship in the Suez Canal. And that was like one of their core desires throughout history, basically. Russia is always looking for war. That's one of the reasons why they went to war in Crimea.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea that like the melting ice is taking away Russia's defense, that's a good thing for them. They like this because it gives them a better port access. Like whoever said that is a complete. Whoever said that needs to go back and take history of international relations, like whatever. What was it? The 101 and 102 or whatever it was that I taught. They need to come back and take history of international relations because that was a stupid comment. Excuse me.
Did you see the thing at the bottom, the picture that changes from 2016 to 2020? If you look in 2016, literally all the sites have been cleared off to be built. And then 2020, they're built. It's like, well, yeah, okay, by 2016, they're building this stuff. It's not as if this was not known. It's like, look, they're really building stuff. Well, yeah, they cleared it all 4 years ago. I'd hope they got it done by now. There's nothing else there to stop.
Oh, this is sorry. I was looking at the 2014 one.
Oh, I didn't see 2014 one.
Oh, it's similar-ish.
Yeah.
They really put a lot of they put a lot of their graphic people on this assignment, on this piece.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, anyway.
So
very odd, bizarre thing. And anyway, I don't know. Keep your eye on the Arctic. Maybe that's why Trump wanted to buy Greenland.
Oh, Russia.
I think that the Norwegians are rightly concerned.
Sure. I guess. I mean,
they've had issues with Russia attacking them through the Arctic before. So I can understand why the Norwegians are concerned about this.
I mean, serious question. If someone wants to stand up to the Russians, wouldn't they get enough support to stop them?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Isn't Putin now cleared to be like president through, his 80th birthday?
You run for 2 more terms. That's it. Just 2 more terms.
He'll be like 80, I think. What's a term?
I don't know. I thought that too. It's like he can run for 2 more terms. It's like, oh, okay. Is that like 50 years pop, or how does that work? I heard someone the other day, and I don't know. They argued that actually Russia is far more liberalized democracy today than we think about it. Like their point is that we think of it as like communist, Soviet Russia, and it's like it's nowhere near that. It's not, because you had the wall and the wall's down, and so whatever you think about it today, it's fundamentally better than it was 30, 40 years ago. And so it might be bad. They're not trying to defend it, but it's just not nearly what it was back in the cold.
Yeah, but at least everybody knew that they were communist back then. Now they have this like veneer of democracy, and yet they like anyone who like deigns to challenge Putin ends up either being poisoned by some sort of radioactive isotope or ends up in like a Siberian prison on a hunger strike. So like at least back then we knew they were bad and we like shunned them from all elements of the world. Now we're like do business with them, and I don't know. I mean, I don't live there. I'm like, it's hard to say whether it's like what's better or not. I think as long as we understand what they are actually, then, as long as you know what you're getting into.
Well, I think that we wrap up here. I think that's my problem, is that I don't think they're a huge threat militarily to any country that has legitimate allies or wants to stand up to them. The problem is that Europe wants to play the game to where one day they're the bad guy and they need protection, and the next day they're not that bad. They can buy from them because the prices are cheaper, and there's no real cohesive narrative on what people think about Russia. And so it's, for me, that I think they're pretty harmless by and large. Maybe there's some countries that should be concerned, but if Germany wants to put an end to a lot of the Russian stuff, they could. They just don't want to. So.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I don't think that they want to at all.
So, all right, Ms. Wald, that is a wrap. we will be back. We got a guest coming on next week. Who's coming on next week? Let's see here. It is the guy that you reached out to, I believe.
The guy from the carbon capture?
Grant, Ted Flinton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are they the carbon capture people?
I
Maybe.
believe so.
Oh, that's going to be interesting. Definitely tune in for that. That's going to be fun.
Yeah, so we'll be back next week, and we'll talk to you then.
Sounds good.